Hello everyone and welcome to All Things Watch, the place where we talk all things movies, television, streaming, and everything in between. So if you're into that, then go ahead and click that subscribe button. But in this video, we are going to talk about episode 4 of the brand new spin-off series in the Walking Dead universe, which is of course The Ones Who Live, and episode 4 was titled Become. And when you actually look at the title to all of these episodes, it really spells out a phrase. It is years gone by and then what we become. And I believe the finale is going to be titled The Last Time, or One Last Time, or Last Time, or something like that. So I'm going to be very curious to see how that plays out in the finale, especially with how this episode ends up ending and whatnot. And this was, for me at least, this was a pretty devastating episode because Jadis does unfortunately meet her untimely demise. And honestly, I was a big fan of Jadis and whatnot, but let's just go ahead and jump into the scene-by-scene breakdown. So this episode actually opens with Gabriel, which I was very surprised about. In fact, at first I thought maybe it was going to be Morgan. I feel like this series have had a lot of hints of Morgan's return. Plus, if you haven't seen the finale to Fear the Walking Dead, then spoiler alert, but his story ends in Fear the Walking Dead with him saying that he is interested in going out and searching for Rick once again. And we know that he probably will find him because he's already found him once before in the main series. And of course, Daryl was also somebody that had a big hand in him finding Rick and whatnot. So honestly, I really thought that this was going to be Morgan, but it turns out that it was actually Gabriel. And that's okay too, because I was very excited to see Gabriel. And we learned the significance of him and how he ties into this story, and specifically with Jada. So it opens with him killing a walker, and then it doesn't waste any time, and it goes right back to our two favorite heroes, at least of this series, which of course is Rick and Michonne. And this episode I felt did a really good job at sort of going back to the original episodes from the original series. They've been fighting, our heroes and survivors have been fighting so many different, communities, and having so many big wars now with different factions and whatnot, that I think we sort of have forgotten about the fact that all the way back in season 1 of The Walking Dead, the biggest enemy were the walkers. And so this episode sort of takes us back to the OG episodes, to the OG series, when it was just a bunch of, a small group of people going out scavenging, trying to survive, in which the biggest threat was the walkers. Now, of course, Jadis is a threat in this one as well, but still, it was really nice to see this really fresh sort of, taking a step back and getting away from the giant, CRM or Commonwealth or Alexandria and the huge amounts of people and communities that we've actually met, and just gone back to the, on the road, trying to survive, scavenging, killing a couple of walkers along the way. So it was really nice, and I really appreciated that of the episode. I wanted to throw this screenshot in here as well, because this is once again a beautiful panorama shot of some absolutely amazing, beautiful, gorgeous countryside, which we got to see a little bit of that in Daryl's spin-off series, Daryl Dixon. We got to see a lot of really beautiful settings, a lot of very different settings as well, because he was over in France, so it's really nice to see that. So I really appreciate little moments like this when they do give us these beautiful, breathtaking scenes of the outside country and the outside world. And so that's the reason why I wanted to throw this screenshot in here, just to show what a beautiful location, what a beautiful area. And so Rick and Michonne ends up coming to this, I think it was like a hunting lodge or something, or some kind of like national park lodge. And I just thought that this scene was so funny between the two. Rick holds up this little license plate thing, which obviously is a souvenir that you can buy pretty well anywhere that you go, in terms of like tourist type shops or gift shops or museums, or in this case hunting lodges. And he sees a little license plate that says Junior, and he looks at Michonne and he's like, hey, should I buy this and bring it back to Rick Jr.? And Michonne's like, well, nobody actually calls him Junior, other than, like, in this case, when we're talking about each other, it's just sort of a little nickname that she puts on him, RJ. And so it was really cool, little back and forth and a little bit of a banter. He also finds a golden necklace, which actually says Michelle, but he ends up cracking off the Michelle part, and so that there's only the M remaining. And so he obviously wants to give that to Michonne. And so because he's giving her these things and whatnot, it makes me a little bit nervous that maybe either her or either Rick or Michonne will not, make it out of this series. And I don't necessarily mean season one, but I do think there will be another season, even though they haven't confirmed the season two. I think they're more so just doing that because they're waiting until the finale airs. I just don't think that, it would be very wise for them to confirm a season two, because that might be a little bit of a spoiler for the finale. Then we would know that most likely Rick and Michonne would survive. But I do feel like Michonne is probably at a higher risk of being killed, more so than Rick, just because Michonne has so much other work that she's involved with now. She's involved with Marvel in the MCU, and she's, she has a lot of, gigs like that, and she is, starting to sort of go down that writing and director, sort of path. And so I feel like if either one of these two characters would die in this series, once again, not necessarily season one, but maybe in season two or three, I feel like Michonne would be the one that's highest at risk of being killed off, just because I feel like she probably has a little bit more on the go in the real world than what Andrew Lincoln does. Because the reason why Andrew Lincoln, sort of departed from the main series was because he wanted a break and whatnot. He wanted some time to be with his family. So part of me wonders if all of this stuff is sort of leading up to the fact, that maybe it's a possibility, at least, that we could see Michonne eventually end up being killed off. But we'll have to wait and see what happens there. And so then we get a really funny scene of Michonne holding up this little baby sort of hatchet or axe, and it's, you can tell how sharp it is. You can see that it's made of real metal and whatnot. And she's like, maybe I'll bring this back to RJ. And Rick is like, really? Like, is he that kind of person? Would he want that type of thing? And she's like, hey, Judith has a sword. They're just like us. So once again, really cool how the children are sort of mirroring the parents. I also wouldn't be surprised if eventually we got that type of series as well. Maybe a series where Judith and RJ are grown up, maybe with Maggie's child or something like that. I could see sort of the next generation of The Walking Dead being the, sort of the remnants of the original characters, the children and all that stuff. So it would be pretty interesting to see if they went that route. I don't think they will, but it's just because I don't think they will, don't mean they won't. I could see, the AMC wanting to do that, wanting to keep this series alive for as long as possible, but we'll have to wait and see. So eventually Rick and Michonne ends up departing, and they run into this group who are actually being, attacked by a bunch of walkers and a bunch of zombies. And so they end up helping the group. They fight off the zombies and save their lives, and then they go even a step further, and they give them some food and stuff that they have just scavenged from, their previous location, which was basically like a bunch of Mr. Noodles or noodle type food. And they actually share their supply with this group, but this group then ends up turning on them, literally pulling a gun on them, which was just so dumb because they just saved their lives and also fed them. And so it's just, but it just goes to show the type of world that they're in, because what the guy says, he wasn't lying. He's like, every hour can be the difference between life and death. The world is constantly changing, by the hour. And so I could, sort of sympathize with him. I get where he's coming from, but it was still a little bit of a dick move to want to attack Rick and Michonne the moment not only that they saved their life, but they even gave them something to eat. And so then we end up seeing Rick and Michonne. They make their way to this cabin, and this is when we get a little bit more romance. This absolutely, first and foremost, The Ones Who Live absolutely is a love story between Rick and Michonne. But once again, because the name of the series doesn't really have anybody's name in it, like this is not called Rick and Michonne, it's not called, Daryl Dixon or anything like that. They could really have, season two be about, a different set of heroes or a different set of survivors. It doesn't always have to be about Rick and Michonne, which makes me think that maybe they, at least one of them I feel like could be at risk of not surviving the series, but we'll have to wait and see and everything. But either way, they set up here, and while they're here, Rick finally ends up giving Michonne the necklace that he sort of made and also found, because he found the necklace and then he sort of cracked it off so that it was only the M. And so he hands her the necklace, and of course she really loves it. And they have a really cool little romantic scene here, and it was really nice to see that, see them continuing to bond and just continuing to get closer and closer, sort of back to the way that we've known Rick and Michonne back in the main series. And I think by the end of this episode, they're pretty well back to where they were, and maybe to some degree even a little bit closer. And so we have this mysterious figure outside now who actually knows, not only notices Rick's sort of little, tripwire, his little, sort of his little defense mechanism type thing here, but the person actually knows how to disarm it as well. So I had no doubts in my mind right from the get-go that this was very likely going to be Jadis for a couple of reasons. One, Jadis would be smart enough to know this, and not to mention the fact that she was also in the CRM, so any form of training and whatnot that Rick might have, I feel like Jadis would have as well. Plus, there's a lot of history between him and Jadis, even with the all-out war back in the main series when she was still ahead of the garbage people, or whatever they called themselves at that time, or the junkyard. And so, I feel like she has just been around Rick's group and those survivors such a long time that she just knows how they act and how they would, sort of, defend the perimeter type thing. So she ends up getting through no problem. Of course, it does turn out that it is Jadis, but we have a really cool transition here where we get the first flashback now between Jadis and Gabriel, and this now is sort of shows how Gabriel ties into the overall story. This was also really interesting and really cool to see as well because it gives Jadis a little bit of a backstory, sort of fills in what she's been up to over the past few years, and by the end of the episode we learn that she has actually been going to Gabriel once a year and actually sort of having these little meetings. So the first flashback here that we see is from 3 years ago, and as we see these flashbacks in accordance to the episode and what's going on in the present day, you learn that Gabriel was sort of actually helping her find her way back to go from Jadis back to Anne, because I believe Anne was her real name, but Jadis is sort of like her CRM name. It's sort of like this new name that she's given herself when she joined the CRM and whatnot. And so, it was really cool to see, Gabriel sort of helping her, because if you remember back to the main show, in the main series, there was a point in time when Jadis actually had Gabriel as well, but they end up bonding and whatnot, and we do know that Jadis ended up going back with the community at one point, I believe, because, Rick basically wanted her to join them, sort of like a second chance. He let her live, which is essentially why she saved him, I believe. I've been saying since the very first episode that I believe there was a huge amount of mutual respect between Rick and Jadis, even though they're not necessarily allies. I did think that both of them had a lot of respect for each other, and Jadis literally comes out and says in this episode that she does have respect for Rick and whatnot. And so it was really cool to see. Also, I wanted to give some props to the editing and the directing. The way that these flashbacks were edited into the overall series, or the overall episode, was done really well. And so then transitions from this flashback into Jadis now in the present day. And she now has the gun pointed at Rick and Michonne, who, of course, are in bed. They were asleep basically when she comes in. But as you can see, it's just starting to become daylight now. And of course, she ends up holding them, so to speak. And this is the first little glimmer of Jadis when you can sort of see her almost agreeing with Rick and Michonne, but not quite to the point where she's going to actually let them go, because she does believe in her cause a little bit more than what she believes in them. But she does straight up tell them, she says to Rick that there's a lot of unspoken words, meaning that there was a few things that she wanted to say to him before she actually killed him and whatnot. And so it was, you could really see Jadis is really torn here, because on one hand, she knows Rick saved her life. She knows that Rick is a good leader, which is essentially why she respects him to begin with, was because she was a good leader as well until the Saviors took out all of her people and whatnot. So you can see that, they do have that mutual respect, but at the same time, she does care more for the cause, and really she's trying to make Rick open his eyes and be like, hey, you gotta look past you and, Michonne, you gotta look past Alexandria. Everything that we're trying to do is for the greater good of humanity as a whole. But of course, Rick and Michonne ends up fighting back, and it was a really funny little scene because Michonne ends up stabbing Jadis with that little tiny mini hatchet or axe that she was going to give RJ, and the blow that she, gives Jadis seems to be like it's most likely going to be a very life-threatening blow. Jadis will likely not survive if she doesn't get help, because it, seems like it hit her sort of like her torso, so it probably hit some organs maybe a little bit and whatnot, and obviously it was very painful as well. Which then transitions back then to the next sequence of flashbacks between Jadis and Gabriel. Once again, Gabriel trying to help Jadis back to finding herself, to who she is, sort of the good side of her. It's almost like Jadis has like a split personality or two different personalities, but really she's torn between the two, so she don't actually have, like, not literally a mental disorder, although she has seen a lot of trauma, but you can tell that she is torn between these two worlds. She actually compares the two worlds at one point in the episode. She's like, on one hand I'm Anne, on the other hand I'm Jadis. One hand I'm in Alexandria, I love Alexandria. On the other hand, I love the CRM. And so it was really fun to see that banter. It was also a great way to include Gabriel back in the series as well, and back in the show and whatnot. And then so once we get that flashback sequence, then once again a great transition. Now we see the car chase that was actually in the trailers between Rick Michonne and Jadis. But now the tables have turned a little bit, because at the beginning of the episode, Jadis was hunting Rick and Michonne, but now it's the other way around. Rick and Michonne are now hunting Jadis, which is why this car chase sequence is happening. And of course, they end up, basically running her off the road, and her car is no longer usable. So she now has to get out and run and walk away by foot. She's still on the run because because Michonne, is not going to let her go. Michonne is on a mission now at this point, and she's just basically, she doesn't want Jadis to get away. There's just too much at risk, and she wants to end Jadis as quickly as possible. So Jadis ends up stumbling upon the same people that Rick and Michonne had helped previously, who, the same people that they gave the ramen noodles to, who end up holding them hostage and whatnot, and which was also funny too, because Michonne actually took the noodles back, which I thought was really funny as well. But anyways, Jadis ends up going to them, and she's like, hey, I need your help, if you don't mind helping me and protecting me. She's like, I have a community, I have food, shelter, safety, somewhere where you can go and actually live a relatively normal life. Now, I have no doubts in my mind that Jadis is lying here. I have, no doubts in my mind that there's no way she's going to bring them back to the CRM. I think she would have absolutely killed them, but for now, she needs their help, so she just kind of plays that card. And so Rick and Michonne ends up coming to this abandoned site or warehouse or whatever type of building it is. It's abandoned, and of course, we know that there's an ambush here. So as soon as they go in, the same people that they had helped earlier in the episode now ambush them, and now Rick and Michonne knows that Jadis has got to them first, but Rick and Michonne are just two, forces to be reckoned with. There's no way that these people, who are basically not even trained, would even have the capability of holding down someone like Rick and Michonne, and they overpower them, and then that whole group of people ends up being eaten by walkers, which could have been avoided. They didn't. There was no need for them to have to die, really, but they were trusting Jadis, and they just wanted. I guess they wanted that peace and safety that most of the people in The Walking Dead really wants, and so they end up fighting against Rick and Michonne, and they end up losing, like what most people do. And then we end up coming to the final flashback now between Jadis and Gabriel, and it's also important that each flashback takes place during a different time. As I said, they do meet up once a year. So the first sequence was 3 years ago, then it was 2 years ago, and then this sequence here now is 1 year ago. And this is when Gabriel and Jadis' relationship sort of takes a pretty big step forward. She actually kisses him in this flashback sequence, and he's sort of trying to convince her to come back with him back to Alexandria, but then she sort of questions the choice that she's made about even meeting up with Gabriel to begin with. She sort of says, she put herself in such a vulnerable position, and also put Gabriel in a very vulnerable position, because he's sort of like a witness, and he's sort of like a loose end now. And so she pulls the gun on him, and she's literally just about to kill him. But of course, we learn later on in the episode that she doesn't kill him, which is very important, because that means now that Gabriel is still very much alive in this universe, and it means that he could end up making an appearance again, maybe in a season 2 if they do it, or maybe in a different spin-off series. And then it transitions back, and we see this really cool sequence here where, you just get to see how courageous and how bold Jadis is. She literally stands up while all these zombies are going to eat her, because she knows that Michonne is just, she's not, Michonne is concerned about the kids. She is concerned about Alexandria, and it was just really cool to see that boldness and how, how courageous Jadis really is. She was literally willing to let these walkers eat her, but because she trusted that Michonne would make the right decision, which of course she ends up doing. But then Rick and Michonne ends up sort of double-crossing Jadis, and they ends up pulling a gun on Jadis, and while they have the gun on her, of course a walker sort of comes out of nowhere and actually ends up biting her in the neck. And so now, no matter what they do, there's no way that Jadis can survive, simply because of the location of the bite. It wasn't on her arm or her leg, so they can't amputate her. She is going to die no matter what. And honestly, a little part of me kind of felt a little sad about this, because like I said, I'm a huge fan of Jadis. Jadis, and I love the actor who portrayed Jadis, and I thought she was a really interesting character, and she's the only character in the entire Walking Dead universe that has actually been in multiple series. She was in World Beyond, she was in The Walking Dead, now she's in The Ones Who Live, and so it was, it was kind of sad to see her go, because I would have loved to see, and actually I would still love to see a series based on that character, or maybe like a prequel or something, to see her story, or maybe if they did an episode in like Tales of the Walking Dead, or more Tales of the Walking Dead, if they dedicated a full episode to her for a backstory or something, see what led her to the garbage people, see how she sort of met the CRM to begin with. And I just think there's a lot of story left to this character that has not been explored yet. But either way, it was really sad to see her get bitten, even though she is sort of the bad guy, I guess, of the show. I'm such a big fan of her that I just really didn't want anything to happen to her. But during the sequence, once again, huge callbacks to the main series. We literally see the sequence where the first time we meet her, she's there doing art, and she sort of opens up to Rick, tells Rick, hey, I wish I was an artist and whatnot, and or still an artist and whatnot, and we actually see some of her artwork. There was something with Glenn there. She had something with Glenn, and just a whole bunch of, stuff that she did. She was very artsy, and it was just really a great callback to the main series. She even ends up giving Rick the ring that Gabriel gave her, which was, I thought, really cool too, because Rick is then a little bit confused, because she actually knew the conversation that he had with Gabriel on the bridge before he ended up blowing up the bridge, and I think it took him off guard a little bit, kind of made him even a little bit weary, or even a little bit stunned, because he was like, how did you know this? Where did you get this ring? How did you know about the conversation? Because obviously all these meetings that she was having with Gabriel were in secret, and she also used to tell Gabriel to keep it secret as well. So it's just really cool, that this sort of came full circle, which also sort of came full circle from the beginning of the episode, because in the beginning he wanted to give Michonne a necklace, and now he has a ring, which I think is something that a lot of people was sort of hoping for to begin with. We always sort of thought that they would, be married in The Walking Dead to some degree, given the fact that they're sort of like a married couple anyways, but then this sort of really ties the knot, and it would be a great way to incorporate Father Gabriel again eventually in the future, because he could still perform that wedding. But after she gives him the ring and everything, he knows his time, and he ends up having to shoot Jadis and actually kill her. But another really sad part of this episode is that when he goes to do it, he can't even look at her, because once again, I think he still looks at her with a lot of high regard and a lot of respect. Like I said, I've been literally saying from the very first episode that I believe that they had a lot of respect for each other, and then in this episode, she straight up literally says it out of her own mouth. She's like, I have a lot of respect for you, Rick, and whatnot, which was a lot of the reason why he she brought him to the CRM to let him live, because he saved her life against Negan. He also took her in, he forgave her, and also she knew that he was a great leader. Now, I don't know necessarily that she knew that he would become actually part of the military. I don't know that she rescued him to actually be in the military or not. I think she more or less just rescued him so he wouldn't die. I don't know that she, could foresee the fact that he would have actually joined the CRM, but maybe she did. I don't really know. But either way, it was really cool, and really sad, really, to see that story. And I still hope we see Jadis again in the future, maybe through flashbacks, or even if we did get to see even one episode of her in terms of origin or something. But this, really felt like a real true goodbye for the character, and it was kind of sad that, they were against each other and on opposite sides. But she did tell Rick how to destroy the dossier and the file that would lead the CRM back to Alexandria. And the only other big thing to take away from that sequence as well was that Michonne did say that her and Rick would end up, going and maybe taking on the CRM. She told Jadis that Rick would go and end up getting promoted and, make his way up through the ranks, and that they would try to take the CRM down from the inside. I actually don't believe that they're going to do that, or at least I kind of hope not. I would like to see them return to Alexandria first, at least. I have been predicting that, the CRM would eventually go to war with them, because it seems like the overall universe has been setting them up to be the big overarching sort of the nemesis, and I do think there's ties to the CRM with France as well, which is where Daryl is. But either way, we'll have to wait and see. There's not enough episodes for them to do it in this season, but maybe they could do it like in a season 2 or something. But we'll have to wait and see, what they decide, what the writers decide. I guess it depends on ratings and everything as well. How many people are interested? Do people want to see that? And all that good stuff. And then for the very final sequence and the last scene of the episode, at least the last significant scene, we see Rick and Michonne, and he pulls out the ring, and he finally actually proposes to her, and of course she says yes. But I also really liked how she got down on one knee as well, which made them look more like equals, and really, it was just a really cool shot and really cool scene, and a great way to sum up their love story in this type of universe and in this world. So it'd be very interesting to see where it goes from here. Now there's only one episode left to The Ones Who Live season 1. They still haven't actually confirmed season 2, but after seeing this episode, it could truly go either way. They really could just, end it with them going to get these documents and the dossiers, destroying the documents, and then just going back to Alexandria. They really could end it like that. There really doesn't need to be a conflict between the CRM and Alexandria. They also don't really know much about the Commonwealth yet, so really the Commonwealth would be involved as well, especially now with the way the main series ended. I think it was with Ezekiel. He ended up taking over and sort of becoming the new leader of the Commonwealth, and so obviously we have no doubts in our mind that he would absolutely go to war for Rick, but I don't really know that they'll go that route. It's definitely a possibility. I would even be interested in seeing a full series based on the CRM, kind of like what they did with World Beyond, but a little bit different, rather than having the story being told from the perspective of outsiders and from the city people. Maybe have the story being told from the perspective of the soldiers themselves. Could be a great origin story, once again, kind of like how Fear the Walking Dead began, with the fall of mankind. They could do something like that with the CRM, see the military fall and crumble until it sort of evolves into the CRM. So it'd be interesting to see how that goes as well. But overall, I really absolutely loved this episode. It was probably my favorite episode of the season so far, and like I said, there's only one episode left, so if I had to make any predictions, how do I think this series will end? I do, given the fact that they haven't confirmed the season 2, I do think that there will be. I just don't think that there's enough time left for them to be able to clue everything up. I think everybody wants to see that reunion between Rick and his children. I think that needs to happen. I think everybody is really looking for a reunion between Rick and Daryl, and as far as I know, they confirmed at least 3 seasons for Daryl, so that's not going to happen anytime soon. And I do think that we want to see Rick reunite with basically all the survivors. The only fear that I have is that they're both not going to make it out. Like I said, if there's a season 2, I do think both will survive season 1, but I don't know necessarily that they're both going to survive the whole series as a whole, the whole universe, however way they decide to end the series and end the Walking Dead universe as a whole. But I do feel like Michonne will end up being killed before Rick. Like I said, outside of the Walking Dead, Denai Guerrera, she has a ton of work outside of The Walking Dead. She's a part of other really big franchises, so I do think that is more likely that she would be killed off as opposed to Rick. But then again, it's hard to know because with these new little spin-off series, they're only 5 or 6 episodes each, so she could absolutely stick around because, they could probably film that whole series in a month or 2 or a couple months, so it's really hard to predict really at this point. For anyone who doesn't know the comics, so I guess a little spoiler alert there, but if you haven't read the comics, at the end of the comics, Rick actually does die, so they could kill him off if they wanted. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see what the showrunners decide, what the writers decide, and hopefully they will do whatever suits the story as opposed to killing someone just for the sake of killing someone. I hope they stay true to the story, which is something that these spin-off series have been doing really well, really, for the most part. I think Dead City could have done a little bit better, but it was still a great series nonetheless. Daryl Dixon was a great series, and now this one is a great series. In terms of the writing and directing, I think that the writing probably for this series was the best, but I think that maybe Daryl's series looked the best in terms of the environment, the setting, but a lot of that was just because, he's in a completely different area. He's over in France, and it was just really fun to get to see the fall of France, because there was one episode in Daryl's show where they saw the fall of the world over in France, so that was really cool and really fun to see as well. And honestly, all I hope really is that eventually we do get a series, or at least, an episode or some episodes or some form of tie-in to all these spin-off series, where they will all be connected at some point. And I think the CRM would be a great way to connect them all. You could see all the armies from Dead City, plus Daryl, and then Carol, because Carol's going to be in season 2 as well. Carol. And then, of course, we still have that mobile community that helped Michonne here on The Ones Who Lived in episode 2. I think that they could play a big role into it as well. So you could see Alexandria, Commonwealth, and all these huge factions and huge cities and huge locations teaming up to go to war against the CRM. But like I said, I'd be also very curious to know if France knows about it and how Daryl's story will tie into it. Because he got some pretty cool characters over there. He finally found his grandfather's grave, I believe it was, or his great grandfather's grave. So it will be cool if he ended up staying over there and actually settling in with some of the characters that he's met over there, and get to have that life that he basically always wanted, where he could have a happy ending. Because we want some of our characters to have a happy ending. Hopefully they don't all die, but at the same time, hopefully they don't all live either. We got to see some tragedy by the end of it as well. So I just hope that the writers do it right and do the show justice and do the universe and the series justice. And other than that, I just can't wait to see the finale, and I can't wait to see if they'll do a season 2, which I do think they will, but we'll have to wait and see. And I just can't wait to see how everything ties in the future, and also if they'll do any more spin-offs. I'm very curious to see how all of that goes. So with that being said, folks, that's my review of episode 4 of The Ones Who Live. If you've seen this episode and you liked it, let me know your thoughts down below. Whether you liked it or you didn't like it, really let me know either way. And if you liked this video, click that subscribe button. And until the next one, take care.